If you were going to start a brand new world-dominating movement today, and I mean a movement designed to last for millennia, where exactly would you build your headquarters?
Well, naturally, you'd probably think you should put it in the bustling center of the world, right?
Exactly. You'd want a place with maximum visibility. Established infrastructure, global trade routes, maybe a massive population to draw from.
It just makes logistical sense.
It totally does.
Yeah.
But what if, and this is what we're looking at today, what if the most strategic, foolproof location is actually an empty, unforgiving, completely waterless desert?
Which sounds completely counterintuitive at first.
It really does. So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are exploring the profound philosophical concept of how sacred spaces are engineered from the ground up.
Yeah, and how the collective memory of an entire civilization can be quite literally overwritten.
We are diving into a truly sweeping theoretical framework today, primarily drawn from a fascinating work by Dr. Khaled Waleed. It's called The Philosophy of Sacred Space and Manufactured Memory.
Right, and what Dr. Waleed is doing here is asking us to look at the mechanics of how human consciousness interacts with geography.
Which is a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It is. He proposes that the physical spaces we consider, sacred or central to our worldviews are almost never accidents of history. They are usually the result of deliberate, masterful engineering.
Okay, before we really get our hands dirty with the mechanics of this, I want to frame how we're approaching the material today for you, the listener.
Absolutely, that's crucial.
Think of this entirely as a pure philosophical, political, and symbolic thought experiment. We're exploring Dr. Waleed's theoretical framework about how any new power might hypothetically engineer a new religious or political center.
Specifically to replace older established ones like Jerusalem or Petra or Rome.
Right, so we aren't looking at this as theologians trying to prove or disprove a faith.
No, definitely not.
And we aren't historians trying to settle an academic debate about specific dates or events. We are taking absolutely no sides regarding any religious or political viewpoints.
We are just strictly unpacking the architectural blueprint of belief. Like, how do you build an absolute truth from scratch?
Exactly. That is the perfect lens for this. So Dr. Waleed uses the hypothetical example of the Hijaz Desert, that remote, arid region in the Arabian Peninsula, as his ultimate case study.
Right, and he asks a foundational question. If a rising political power or an ambitious religious group want to establish an entirely new center of the world, why on earth would they choose a remote, hostile desert?
Instead of the established, gleaming cities of the ancient world.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. I really want to challenge the premise right out of the gate. Because on the surface, choosing a barren desert makes zero logistical sense.
Oh, it's a logistical nightmare.
Right. If you have the momentum and the power to potentially claim a major, thriving city that already commands respect, a city with walls, aqueducts, prestige, why would you actively choose a spot where there is nothing but sand and black rocks?
You're basically starting on hard mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you are starting on hard mode logistically, but, and this is Waleed's core argument, you are playing on easy mode philosophically.
Okay, how so?
He introduces a concept he calls the safe distance. Established cities are heavily burdened by their own history.
Burdened by it. Interesting.
Yeah, think about a city like Jerusalem or Rome. They are completely saturated. They have ancient families who hold the local power, entrenched political systems, competing religious authority.
And physical ruins everywhere.
Exactly. If you try to establish a brand new absolute narrative in a city like that, your new story is forced to constantly compete with the physical evidence of the old stories.
Okay, let me contextualize that for the listener.
Sure.
It's like trying to launch a revolutionary new tech company, but you are somehow forced to build your startup inside the lobby of your biggest competitor's corporate headquarters.
That's a brilliant analogy. It would be a nightmare.
Right. You are constantly surrounded by their branding, their employees, their architecture. Every time you try to pitch your new vision, the investors are looking over your shoulder at the giant, successful company that built the room you're standing in.
You can never truly be seen as the ultimate innovator. You're just the new tenant.
The new tenant, yeah. You're always going to be compared to the original.
And Dr. Waleed points out that places with deep history are what he calls heavy. They are heavy with the legacy of figures like Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, or whoever the local deities and kings might have been.
So if a new power comes along and tries to plant its flag there, It will always be the runner-up.
Exactly. It's forced into a defensive posture. You're constantly having to justify your existence and explain how you fit into the lineage of the original inhabitants.
A new authority in an old city is never truly absolute.
Never. So the desert offers an escape from that weight. It offers a blank slate.
Because you don't have to explain your relationship to the old king, since there were never any old kings there to begin with.
Right. The blank slate is the golden dream of any project wanting to build legitimacy from scratch. Dr. Waleed calls this escaping the centrality of the prophets.
Escaping the prophets, I like that.
By choosing a location with zero prior prophetic or imperial legacy, the new power frees itself from the competition of ancient symbols.
It allows them to create a completely new, unblemished narrative.
Yeah, there's no ancient temple across the street whose priests can object to your new doctrines. There's no popular, localized memory that can contradict your origin story.
I see the appeal of that. I mean, think about it. If you want to completely reinvent your own life, you don't stay in your hometown where everyone remembers every embarrassing mistake you made in high school.
No, you move across the country to a new city where nobody knows your history.
You get to invent who you are.
Mm.
And what Dr. Waleed is saying is you scale that concept up to an entire civilization. You need geographical neutralization.
Neutralization is the absolute key word here. The ideal sacred space, according to this framework, must be politically neutral. It cannot threaten existing superpowers initially.
Right, because places like the Levant or Mesopotamia were the epicenters of ancient conflicts. They were constantly fought over.
Constantly. By the Romans, the Persians, the Byzantines. But a remote desert point sits entirely outside that imperial geography. It is in the geopolitical blind spot.
So it can grow without being crushed immediately.
Exactly. Myths and absolute truths do not grow well in crowded, highly documented cities packed with verifiable facts, tax collectors, and competing scholars. They require isolation and a sense of mystery.
Okay, but the desert is massive. This is where I need to dig into the geography, because if you just need a blank slate, why not pick any random dune in the Sahara?
Right, why the Hejaz specific?
Exactly. What makes that specific empty valley better than any other empty valley?
Well, this is where Dr. Waleed's theory transitions from abstract philosophy to precise geographical engineering. He argues that this specific location possesses a very rare, almost paradoxical mix of traits.
He calls it the virgin centrality, right?
Yes. First, look at it as a geopolitical zero point. It sits exactly between the major cultural spheres of the ancient world. You've got the Levant to the north, Yemen to the south, Mesopotamia to the east, and Africa to the west.
It's right in the middle, but crucially, it doesn't actually belong to any of them.
That's the secret. If the founders had chosen a point further north, it would have been culturally absorbed by the Roman or Byzantine Levant.
And if they chose a point further south?
It would have been absorbed by the heavy, ancient history of the Yemeni kingdoms, which already had deeply established inscriptions, wealth, and Christian or Jewish histories.
So by choosing a point in the harsh middle, it acts as a neutral mediator.
Exactly. Anyone coming from any direction can adopt it as their center without feeling like they are submitting to a rival region's established culture.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, there's another geographical detail Dr. Waleed emphasizes that I found fascinating. It's near the trade routes, but not, on them.
Right. He calls this proximity without convergence.
Which seems weird. If you want people to come to your new center, why wouldn't you put it right on the main highway?
Because think about the nature of a place that sits directly on a major international trade route. What does it become?
A transit hub.
Yes, and it's immediately subject to the logic of the market. It gets controlled by merchants, customs officials, tax collectors, passing foreign armies.
The sacred space basically becomes a byproduct of economics.
Exactly.
It essentially becomes a highly profitable truck stop. People are stopping there because they are tired, or because they need to refuel, or to sell goods.
They aren't stopping because they are devoted.
Right. When a place is convenient, it inspires utility, not reverence.
That's beautifully put. By placing the center slightly off the main path in a rugged, enclosed valley that requires a deliberate, difficult detour, you completely change the psychology of the visitor.
Visiting it requires intent.
Exactly. The journey transforms from a convenient layover into a sacrifice.
And that filters out the casual traveler. It demands a spiritual or ideological commitment just to get there. You only go if you have actively decided to submit to the journey.
Which brings us to the actual topography. Dr. Waleed describes the location as a natural temple.
So we're talking about the physical landscape itself now.
Yeah, it is not a wide open plain. It's a narrow, enclosed valley surrounded by dry, black mountains.
Why does that matter? I mean, a wide open plain would let you build a sprawling, magnificent city to show off your new power.
Because open space scatters human attention. An open plain allows for infinite horizontal expansion, which dilutes the focus of the masses.
Oh, I see.
A narrow valley, surrounded by imposing mountains, acts as a natural funnel. It forces the gaze, the physical movement, and the psychological focus of everyone there toward a single central point.
So the geography itself does the work of an architect.
Precisely. You don't even need to build a massive cathedral, because the mountains are the walls of the cathedral.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Furthermore, those mountains create isolation. They provide acoustic isolation from the winds of the desert, visual isolation from the horizon, and deep psychological isolation.
When you enter that narrow valley, you feel a profound separation from the mundane, outside world.
It is an architectural matrix perfectly designed for engineering focus.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to push back heavily on this next point. The waterless paradox.
Oh, this is the best part.
Dr. Waleed points out that this specific valley has virtually no natural water supply. No river, no regular rainfall, no lush oasis.
Right.
I get the psychological isolation, but humans need to drink. Doesn't the city, especially a world center meant to host thousands of pilgrims, need water to survive?
You'd think so.
Picking a waterless valley feels like a fatal flaw that would destroy the movement before it even started.
It absolutely seems like a fatal flaw if you are trying to build an economic capital. But if you were trying to build a spiritual capital, Dr. Waleed argues it is the ultimate feature.
How? Explain that to me.
It all comes down to the philosophy of scarcity. Abundance, like having the Nile or the Euphrates flowing through your city, creates a very specific type of society.
It creates farmers.
It creates farmers, landlords, an agricultural economy based on taxation, property rights, and harvests. Power belongs to whoever controls the irrigation ditches.
Right. If your city relies on a river, your ultimate authority is the river and the people who manage it. Your loyalty is to the soil.
Scarcity, on the other hand, generates holiness.
Oh, wow. Scarcity generates holiness.
Think about it. When a place completely lacks the most basic element of life, survival becomes a mystery. It becomes a test of faith.
People ask, why would anyone live here? How does this place survive?
Exactly. And when water does appear in a completely dry, hostile valley, say, from a single isolated, it isn't viewed as a natural geological resource.
It is perceived as a miracle. It literally defies the logic of nature.
The appearance of water in a void is interpreted as a divine endorsement. It forces the visitor to rely entirely on the meaning of the place rather than its agricultural utility.
The place doesn't give you props. It gives you meaning.
Exactly. As Dr. Waleed frames it, choosing a waterless valley is a massive philosophical declaration. It tells the world, this place is not our center because it is naturally suitable or comfortable.
It is our center strictly because it was chosen by an absolute higher will.
It liberates the sacred space from the authority of nature.
That is a profound shift in perspective. You're completely severing the link between survival and nature and replacing it with survival through belief.
It's pure engineering.
So we painted this picture of the physical geography. An isolated, waterless, narrow valley surrounded by mountains, sitting in a geopolitical blind spot off the main road.
But the physical void is only half of Waleed's equation.
Right. He argues that the human and economic landscape must be equally empty.
To truly engineer a new reality, the social and historical void is even more critical than the physical one. Dr. Waleed outlines that the chosen location must have zero history, zero ruins, zero population, and zero economic value.
Let's break those down. Let's talk about the ruins first. Why are old buildings so dangerous to a new movement?
Because they carry memory.
But if you find a valley with some old abandoned temples, couldn't you just repurpose them, save yourself the labor?
Repurposing ruins introduces a virus into your new narrative. Ruins are what Dr. Waleed calls stone memory. A ruin dictates a story.
Right. It tells you about the civilization that built it.
Exactly. It tells you the gods they worshipped, the architectural style they preferred, the direction they faced when they prayed.
So if there's an old Roman column or an ancient Nabatean carving in the middle of your new sacred city, everyone who looks at it is subconsciously reminded of those past empires.
It forces a competing narrative right into the heart of your new architecture. The stone itself argues with you.
The stone argues with you. Wow, so erasing the architecture helps. But what about the lack of population?
This is key. Dr. Waleed insists the valley must be fundamentally empty of people.
Again, I look at the logistics. If you want to build a new world center, you need laborers. You need a local economy to support the builders.
You'd think that's true for a normal city.
Starting with 0 people seems impossible. How do you build a city with no citizens?
You don't use local citizens. You import a population whose entire existence and status is tethered exclusively to the new symbol.
Because an existing population brings their own baggage.
Exactly. An existing population is essentially a living, breathing memory bank. If a valley already has tribes or villages, they come with local chiefs, entrenched traditions, local dialects.
And stories about what happened on that specific hill 3 generations ago.
Yes. If you bring a new absolute truth to them and say, this mountain has always been the center of the universe, the locals will look at you and say, no, it hasn't. My grandfather used to graze his goats there.
They will inherently resist the new universal narrative with their hyper-local memory.
But an empty place allows the creator to invent everything from scratch. You can invent a new, standard sacred language that is free from the contamination of older dialects.
You can invent brand new names for every mountain, rock, and dry riverbed.
Most importantly, you can engineer a new social hierarchy from the ground up. You determine who has status, who are the caretakers of the symbol, and who are merely visitors.
The blank slate is the ultimate laboratory for total social engineering.
And the 0 economic value ties right into this.
Right, let's talk about the economy. Because you start with nothing, which means you have to build value from 0.
That is exactly the point. If a place is rich, if it has gold mines, or sits on a lush oasis, it has an inherent price tag.
And places with high price tags attract empires.
A wealthy location will inevitably be controlled by merchants or conquered by armies. Dr. Waleed notes that a poor, economically worthless location sits completely outside the logic of the market.
No emperor in Rome or Persia is going to spend vast military resources to conquer a barren, dry valley that produces no grain and holds no gold.
There is nothing to tax. There is no loot to steal. It's economically invisible.
But how does that help the new movement?
Because the place has 0 economic value, you have the unique opportunity to assign it absolute symbolic value.
Oh, I see.
The sheer poverty of the location ensures that the loyalty of the people who journey there is directed entirely at the symbol and the narrative.
They aren't going there to get rich or to trade or to find fertile land. They're going there to submit to an idea.
It transitions the core value of the place from price to meaning. The symbol becomes the supreme, uncontested authority.
This level of deliberate philosophical engineering is staggering. Erasing history, avoiding all ruins, escaping the economy, picking a waterless valley just to force reliance on a symbol.
It is incredibly calculated. It sounds almost supernatural, honestly, like a sci-fi novel about terraforming a new planet to control the minds of the colonists.
It does sound like science fiction. And this brings me to a crucial question for you. We've laid out this incredibly complex theory. But has this massive copy-paste of geography and memory ever actually happened in human history?
It's a fair question.
I mean, can you really just invent a new reality out of thin air, move it to a new location, and get millions of people to believe it is the ancient original truth?
While the absolute totalizing scale Dr. Waleed proposes for his Hijaz thought experiment is uniquely comprehensive, the underlying mechanics are very real.
So it has happened before.
Oh, repeatedly.
Yeah.
The mechanism of transferring cultural memory to legitimize a new power is a well-documented historical playbook. We can look at this as the mechanics of stolen memory.
Stolen memory. Okay, walk me through some concrete historical examples from Dr. Waleed's text where an empire actually stole memory and moved it.
The Greeks and the Romans are the classic, undeniable example of this memory transfer.
Oh, right, because Greek mythology is basically repurposed.
Exactly. The ancient Greeks did not invent their mythology in a vacuum. They absorbed the deep mythological frameworks of the ancient Near East Mesopotamia, the Levant, Egypt.
They took existing flood myths, creation stories, and attributes of specific regional deities.
Hellenized them, repackaged them, and presented them to the world as inherently Greek.
They basically filed the serial numbers off the Babylonian stories and slapped a Greek label on them.
And then the Romans turned around and executed the exact same heist on the Greeks.
True, Rome was a rising, ambitious military power, but they lacked deep, ancient cultural legitimacy.
So they engaged in a massive, deliberate project of memory appropriation. They took the entire pantheon of Greek gods. Zeus became Jupiter, Aphrodite became Venus, Ares became Mars.
They absorbed Greek philosophy, architecture, and literary forms, physically moved the center of this cultural gravity to Italy, and declared it Roman.
They literally copy-pasted the Greek cultural operating system, changed the font, and called it the Roman Empire.
But that's mythology and culture. What about physical geography? Can you actually move a sacred place?
Look at the trajectory of imperial Christianity. The historical foundational events of Christianity took place entirely in the Levant, in and around Jerusalem, Galilee, Bethlehem.
Right. Jesus never went to Rome.
Yet, as the Roman Empire eventually adopted Christianity as the state religion, they faced a geographical problem. The center of their new faith was in a distant, rebellious province.
So what did they do?
Over centuries, they successfully moved the absolute spiritual center of gravity from Jerusalem to Rome.
They relocated the primary authority. They built the massive cathedrals in Rome, established the papacy there, and shifted the primary focus of Western pilgrimage.
The original origin point gets geographically sidelined in favor of the new imperial power center.
Dr. Waleed also mentions the Safavids in the 16th century, right?
Yes. For centuries, the center of Shia Islamic identity, its deepest scholarship, and its primary shrines were heavily rooted in Iraq, specifically places like Najaf and Karbala.
But then the Safavids established a massive new empire in Iran.
And they needed religious legitimacy to unify their territory. So they initiated a massive geographical and cultural shift, funneling resources, building new institutional centers, and essentially relocating the political and scholarly weight of Shia identity into Iran.
They rewrote the geographical focus of millions of believers to align with their new political borders.
And if you want an example of creating a new center from scratch, look at Alexander the Great.
Oh, right, Alexandria.
Alexander is the perfect example of the blank slate approach. He wanted a new capital that wasn't burdened by the ancient priesthoods of Memphis or Thebes in Egypt.
So he built a brand new city on the Mediterranean coast.
In a location with virtually no prior historical weight, he then aggressively funneled the wealth, the texts, the memory, and the scholars of Babylon, Egypt, and Greece into this new vacuum.
He manufactured a new center of the intellectual world by emptying the old centers into his newly built vessel.
Dr. Waleed even gives examples of literal mountains shifting in the collective consciousness.
Wait, shifting mountains, how does that work?
The location of Mount Sinai is a fascinating case study in geographical rewriting. If you look at many ancient texts and early traditions, they strongly suggest the original Sinai of the Exodus narrative was likely located in the northwestern Arabian Peninsula, or modern-day Jordan.
But we think of it as being in Egypt today.
Exactly. During the Byzantine era, imperial authority and monastic movements decided to relocate the memory of that sacred mountain to the southern Sinai Peninsula in Egypt.
But how do you just move a mountain?
You don't move the rock, you move the narrative. They built a massive monastery there, St. Catherine's. They directed all official pilgrimage to that new location. They funded scholars to write about it.
And over time, the new location simply became the undisputed historical reality in the minds of believers.
The name Jerusalem itself has been applied to different locations and spiritual concepts over time to serve various political realities.
When you look at all these examples together, a terrifying pattern emerges.
What's fascinating here is that when a new, highly ambitious power wants to assert absolute dominance, they don't just conquer the old capital.
Right, because conquering the old capital means you have to deal with the ghosts of the old kings and the physical ruins that contradict you.
Instead, they empty the memory of the old world into a geographical vacuum, and then they boldly declare that vacuum to be the original eternal source.
It is the ultimate heist of human consciousness. You steal the prestige of the ancient past, transplant it to an empty desert, and systematically convince everyone that the empty desert was the true sacred temple all along.
It's brilliant and ruthless.
Which leads us to the most practical and, frankly, the most chilling part of Dr. Waleed's framework. It's one thing to recognize that Rome stole Greek myths, or that a mountain's location changed over centuries.
Sure, looking back at history is one thing.
It's another to understand the exact step-by-step mechanism of overriding reality for millions of living people. How do you actually pull off the heist?
Dr. Waleed doesn't just leave it at theory. He lays out a very precise 7-step philosophical blueprint for engineering this new reality.
A step-by-step breakdown. Let's do this.
It is a systematic process of linguistic, textual, and physical replacement. Let's look at the mechanics.
Step 1 in Waleed's blueprint: kill the old name.
The name is the very foundation of memory. If you want to erase a place or a concept from the minds of a civilization, you must first destroy its original name.
Ow, you just ban it.
The new authority bans its use, associates the old name with falsehood, paganism, or antiquity, and scrubs it from the new official texts.
Because without a name, a place cannot be referenced.
Exactly. When the name dies, the place dies in the collective mind.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
If a government stops calling a city New York and aggressively renames it Sector 4 and every document, news broadcast, and map give it 2 or 3 generations, and New York will sound like a mythological kingdom.
It works surprisingly fast.
Okay, step 2. Plant the new name in the vacuum.
Once you have your blank slate geography, your empty desert valley, you start transplanting the stolen names.
The ones you just erased from the old maps.
Right. You take the highly revered names of ancient mountains, sacred valleys, and holy sites from the old world, the names that carry deep psychological weight for the masses, and you simply apply them to the rocks, hills, and dry riverbeds of your new location.
You take the old memory and physically anchor it into the new empty geography.
Precisely.
But wait, if I'm a peasant, and I've heard stories my whole life about a lush, green, sacred valley, and suddenly the emperor points to a dry, black rock in the desert and says, "This is the sacred valley," I'm going to know he's lying.
Your eyes would tell you it's a dry rock.
Exactly. This is where step 3 comes in, and I think this is the most powerful weapon in the entire blueprint. Rewrite the text.
Text is the ultimate authority in the architecture of human belief. A sacred text doesn't just describe a physical place. In the minds of a civilization, the text creates the place.
So you change the book.
If you rewrite the sacred texts or heavily edit the historical chronicles so that all the ancient stories now point definitively to your new desert location, the text overrules physical reality.
The text becomes the new map.
Exactly. If the Holy Book says the ancient patriarchs walked through this specific dry valley, the believers will stand in that dry valley and literally see the footsteps in their minds, even if they were never there.
The text acts as a pair of augmented reality glasses.
I love that comparison. The physical landscape is forced to submit to the written word, which leads directly into step 4. Redraw the geography.
How do you redraw physical geography? You can't move rivers and mountains.
You physically align the new landscape to match the newly rewritten stories. If the new text says there was a sacred well where the founder drank, you dig a well in your new desert location and you give it that sacred name.
Oh, I see. You build the set pieces.
If the text mentions an event happening between 2 mountains, you designate 2 local hills with those names. You physically carve the new textual reality into the dirt.
Ensuring that when pilgrims arrive, the physical evidence perfectly mirrors the book they just read.
It creates a closed loop of validation.
But what about the illiterate? Throughout most of history, the vast majority of people couldn't read the rewritten texts. How do you program them?
That's step 5. Create an annual ritual.
The pilgrimage.
This is where the psychological engineering becomes permanent physical reality. Dr. Waleed emphasizes a profound sociological truth. Physical motion is stronger than abstract thought.
Really? Motion over thought.
Absolutely. A text can be debated by scholars, a geographical map can be questioned. But when you create a massive mandatory annual pilgrimage, when millions of people physically journey to this new site, exhaust themselves, walk its specific paths.
They touch its newly named stones.
Yes, and perform highly synchronized rituals year after year, it solidifies the new reality in their muscle memory.
The physical action bypasses the critical thinking part of the brain. If I sweat, bleed, and cry walking around a specific rock, and my father walked around this rock, and his father walked around this rock, my body tells me this is the center of the universe.
It is no longer an abstract theory. It is a lived physical experience.
The ritual transforms the geographical fiction into an undeniable, tangible spiritual reality. The people themselves become the architects of the new truth through their repetitive motion.
Which brings us to step 6. Build a central symbol.
Every movement needs a heart.
You cannot direct the focus of millions of people into an empty valley indefinitely without giving them a focal point. You must build a central symbol, a specific rock, a shrine, a house, a distinctive geometric shape like a cube.
This central symbol becomes the visual and spatial anchor for the entire new nation.
Wherever they are in the world, they orient themselves toward this single manufactured point. It is the physical manifestation of the new truth.
And finally, step 7. Time erases the original.
This is the most passive step, but it is entirely unstoppable.
Time does the heavy lifting.
Dr. Waleed notes that this process of total memory replacement typically takes about 3 generations, roughly 200 years.
Think about how memory degrades. The first generation remembers the old center.
They might grumble about the change and secretly compare the new desert site to the old, authentic cities.
But they die, and the second generation grows up.
The second generation grows up entirely under the authority of the new center. They hear only vague, confusing, contradictory stories from their grandparents about the old days.
To them, the new center is normal, and the old center is just a rumor.
By the time the third generation is born, the new center is all they have ever known.
The original reality has completely dissolved into a myth, a fairy tale.
Within 3 generations, asking whether the new center is the real one becomes a nonsensical question to the populace.
The sheer weight of time acts as the ultimate eraser. The engineered blank slate becomes the absolute, unquestionable, eternal truth.
It's inevitable.
When you lay out those 7 steps, killing the name, planting the new one, rewriting the text, redrawing the map, instituting the physical ritual, building the symbol, and letting time do the rest, it's a terrifyingly effective blueprint.
It really is.
It's like updating the operating system on a computer.
Yeah.
You don't just delete the old files, you overwrite them with so much new data, new software, and new rules that the hard drive doesn't even have a record that the old system ever existed.
But there is a massive psychological hurdle that we haven't addressed yet.
Oh, what's that?
Changing maps, digging wells, and renaming hills are administrative tasks. Hacking the human consciousness of millions of living people during that transition period is entirely different.
That's true. How do you change the minds of the masses to accept this new operating system without sparking a massive immediate rebellion? People don't just give up their reality quietly.
No, they don't.
Right. You can't just send out a memo saying, everything you believed yesterday is fake, here is the new desert. They will riot.
This is where Dr. Waleed dives deep into the psychology of reprogramming a population, and it is arguably the most brilliant part of the theory.
Okay, let's get into the psychology.
It is not enough to simply erase the old. You have to actively overwhelm the cognitive capacity of the public.
Overwhelm them. How?
Dr. Waleed argues that the human mind forgets the original truth, not because the mind is inherently weak or stupid, but because it is intentionally and relentlessly flooded with alternatives.
You don't hide the truth by locking it in a vault. You hide it by throwing it into an ocean of data. You drown them.
The term Dr. Waleed uses for this is the creation of cognitive noise.
Cognitive noise. That's a great term.
It is a profound insight. When a new power takes over, they don't necessarily need to burn every single old book or execute every old scholar.
Because that creates martyrs and suspicion.
Exactly. Instead, they introduce massive amounts of new secondary texts. They fund scholars to promote multiple, slightly differing readings of the holy text.
They generate a swamp of information.
They produce alternative historical contexts, conflicting accounts of historical events, and an absolute avalanche of supplementary literature.
So they just churn out content.
Endless volumes of jurisprudence, detailed biographies of founders that contradict each other in minor ways, and thousands of localized traditions.
So if a curious citizen tries to find the original truth about where a sacred event actually happened, they don't find a censored blank page.
No, they find 10,000 newly written documents that all contradict each other on the minor details.
And this is the genius part, they all aggressively agree on the core premise that the new location is the center.
That is the absolute brilliance of cognitive noise. When you have 10 different esteemed scholars loudly, publicly arguing over the exact nuanced meaning of a specific verse regarding the new sacred center, the public's attention is entirely captured by the debate.
They are so distracted by the argument over how to interpret the new center, they completely forget to ask if the center itself is legitimate.
The noise causes the mind to lose the ability to distinguish the original trunk of the tree from the thousands of newly grafted branches.
It is misdirection on a civilizational scale. It's exactly how modern algorithms work today. You don't censor an opposing viewpoint, you just flood the feed with so much polarizing noise that the user is too exhausted to find the original source.
It's the exact same mechanism.
Alongside this noise, you mentioned earlier the concept of redefining the self and time. How does time manipulation play into this?
You create a year zero, When a new power wants to finalize its newly engineered reality, it almost always restarts the calendar.
Like the French Revolution creating a new republican calendar.
Exactly, or the shift from BC to AD. The new power forces the population to measure their lives, their harvests, their seasons, and their history strictly in relation to the founding event of the new movement.
When the year you were born is defined by an event that supposedly happened at the new sacred center, your very existence is tethered to that new reality.
It redefines time itself. You can't even tell someone your age without validating the new narrative.
The final psychological tool Dr. Waleed explores is perhaps the most counterintuitive.
Yes, he talks about the necessity of creating, or at least allowing, internal schisms.
I found this totally baffling when I first read it. If I am an absolute ruler trying to establish a brand new, unquestionable center of the universe, why on earth would I want my followers to fight among themselves?
It seems counterproductive.
Wouldn't I want absolute harmonious unity? Schisms seem like a failure of control.
They seem like a failure, but philosophically they are the ultimate proof of success. Dr. Waleed explains that creating internal divisions actually builds a far more cohesive and durable meta-identity.
How does dividing people make them cohesive?
Look at historical examples. The massive, bloody split between Catholics and Protestants in Christianity, or the deep sectarian divides in other traditions.
These factions spent centuries fighting brutal, devastating wars against each other. They burned each other at the stake. How does that possibly help the overarching movement survive?
Because look at what they are fighting over. While they are slaughtering each other over how to interpret the religion, or who should lead the religion, or what specific rituals to perform.
They both implicitly, aggressively agree on the fundamental reality of the religion.
Wow. Yes. By fighting over the details, they validate the premise.
That is mind-blowing.
When two massive factions are willing to die over the proper way to face the new sacred center during prayer, neither side is pausing to question whether the center itself is real or whether it was relocated 200 years ago.
The internal conflict cements the new center's absolute reality.
The friction generates heat, and that heat forges the new identity into something unbreakable. The schism creates an internal dynamic that absorbs all the intellectual, emotional, and physical energy of the population,
leaving absolutely no room in their cognitive bandwidth to question the foundational geography or the engineered memory.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize this incredible, sprawling journey we've been on. We've explored Dr. Khaled Waleed's philosophical framework of what he calls the virgin centrality.
We started by asking a simple question. Why would a new, world-dominating movement choose a barren, waterless, isolated desert valley over a glorious, established city?
And we discovered that this empty desert is actually the ultimate psychological weapon. It provides a blank slate, free from the heavy burdens of history, the stone memory of ruins, and the threat of competing ancient authorities.
We look deeply at the geographical engineering, choosing a geopolitical zero point that belongs to no one, placing it just off the main trade routes to demand sacrifice rather than convenience, and utilizing enclosing mountains to force focus and create isolation.
We saw how the paradoxical lack of water transforms the space from an agricultural hub into a theater for miracles, forcing the people to rely on the symbol rather than nature.
We then explored the absolute necessity of a human and economic void. Zero population allows for total social engineering and the invention of a new sacred language.
And zero economic value ensures that loyalty is given entirely to the idea, not to the marketplace.
We examined the well-documented historical playbook of stolen memory, looking at how empires like the Romans, the Safavids, and figures like Alexander the Great engaged in massive operations of geographical relocation and memory appropriation.
And we walked through the chilling 7-step blueprint for executing this heist. Killing the old name, transplanting it to the vacuum, using the rewritten text as a new map, physically redrawing the geography to match.
Establishing annual rituals to build undeniable muscle memory, creating a central symbol, and finally, letting the unstoppable force of time erase the original truth within 3 generations.
Finally, we analyzed the deep psychological hacking required to make this new operating system stick.
Flooding the collective consciousness with cognitive noise to distract from the truth, restarting the calendar at year 0 to tether existence to the new narrative, and utilizing internal schisms to irrevocably cement the newly engineered reality as the absolute, unquestionable truth.
It is an absolute masterclass in the architecture of human belief. Before we wrap up, I want to connect this directly back to you, the listener.
It's so relevant to today.
It really is. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about grand historical hypotheticals, analyzing ancient empires, desert valleys, and the philosophical rewriting of sacred texts. But do not think for a single second that the mechanics of memory, narrative, and creating noise are relics of the ancient past.
The mechanisms Dr. Waleed describes are highly urgently relevant today. They are exactly how modern media ecosystems, political campaigns, and massive multinational corporations build their own mythologies right now.
Overwhelming the public with secondary information to hide a core truth, redefining historical events to suit a new corporate or political narrative, and deliberately creating tribal schisms online to ensure blind loyalty to a platform, these are not ancient theories.
These are contemporary strategies of control.
We've spent this deep dive talking about how ancient powers might have manufactured sacred spaces and engineered collective memory. But look around you today. Think about the physical spaces, the digital platforms, or the historical narratives you treat as absolute truth in your own life. Ask yourself, are they the original reality, or are you just living in the third generation of a very successful, beautifully engineered blank slate?